Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be discussing my own opinion regarding a big topic that's been dominating the entertainment industry for the past couple of weeks now, and that is whether superhero fatigue is causing the slow death of the modern superhero movie. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I'm currently at just over 580 subscribers and am really trying to reach 1,000 as soon as possible. I post film, book, and TV series reviews. I do opinion pieces on entertainment, news, and affairs. I'm also an author of adult and young adult mystery novels. I recently released a new short mystery called The Intruder. There's a link to it in my video description below, and I encourage you to check it out as well. With that in mind, and without further ado, I'm going to just jump right into it. So I was inspired to make this video after seeing several viral articles by film industry professionals, as well as several viral videos by other YouTube film reviewers that have been coming out over the past few weeks, largely in response to the underwhelming flop of the newest MCU release, Fantastic Four: First Steps. First Steps is, of course, the third MCU flop this year after Captain America: Brave New World and Thunderbolts**. And given that the MCU has only released 3 movies this year, and that Superman, the only DCU movie to release this year, has officially failed to even break even, now that it's left theaters with a box office total of just over $588 million against its budget of nearly $364 million. It's naturally led to speculation by those who understand such matters that the long prophesied superhero fatigue has finally caught up with the modern superhero film, guaranteeing that superhero movies are starting to go the way of the Western, that the day of the billion-dollar box office success is over for them, and that the audience has simply gotten tired of seeing people in capes. Now, naturally, both the MCU and the DCU still have their shills who are trying as hard as they can to explain away what's basically amounted to the year of the superhero flopbuster with fallacious arguments or outright lies, like saying that the audience is too stupid to appreciate superhero movies anymore, or that Superman is actually succeeding at the box office with nearly $600 million because its budget was only a little over $200 million, despite that we've already seen tax records confirming that the actual budget was well near $364 million, or that Brave New World actually performed respectably with less than $500 million at the box office because its budget was only about $180 million, despite that we've seen records confirming that its budget was actually nearly $500 million after all its reshoots and rewrites. But for the rest of us, those who can listen to reason without racing for the nearest bottle of copium, the trend has been inescapably clear and has spurred a healthy amount of speculation that the superhero fatigue that was first predicted roughly 10 years ago when Avengers: Age of Ultron made less than Avengers at the box office has finally caught up with modern superhero movies. And I've seen plenty of well-reasoned arguments for why it has, but I did say at the top of this video that this video was going to be about my own opinion regarding whether it has, and my own opinion is that it has not. No, what I think is finally caught up with modern superhero cinema is bad movie fatigue, as well as bad director fatigue, as well as bad writing fatigue, with just a sprinkle of bad corporate executive fatigue just for good measure. Every MCU and DCU movie that either has failed this year or is failing right now has one thing in common, and that is that it is a mid to poor movie with mid to poor directing and mid to poor writing that was commissioned by mid to poor executives at Disney and Warner Brothers who made the movies by committee. So it shouldn't be a shocker that each and every one of these movies has gotten or is getting a mid to poor box office haul. And it should not be considered a sign that the general audience is tired of the superhero genre in general, because that audience is not showing up in an era where movie tickets and general consumer goods are more expensive than ever to see superhero movies that are mid at best and dumpster fires at worst. Now, just for the sake of clarity here, I'm going to break this little argument of mine down into 3 concise points so that you'll see clearly what exactly I'm describing, and so that you'll see not only that I'm right, but why. For one thing, studios these days are spending far too much to make superhero movies. I'm old enough that I recall the days where a budget of $200 to $300 million was rare enough to be something that a superhero movie generally did not get until and unless it was the third or fourth in a successful trilogy or saga of films that had already proven itself capable of consistently making either $1 billion or close to that amount at the box office. For reference, Iron Man had a budget of about $130 to $140 million. Captain America the First Avenger had a budget of nearly $140 million. Thor had a budget of nearly $150, as did Batman Begins, while even The Dark Knight, one of the most successful superhero movies ever, had a budget of about $180 million. And it was only after those movies succeeded both critically and at the box office that the studio began to trust the franchises with increasing production budgets for sequels. Now, and by now I generally mean since around the time that Avengers Endgame took the world by storm, there's this trend by studio executives to play Russian roulette by throwing caution to the frickin' wind and pumping $250 million or more into superhero properties that are untested with audiences and whose expectation of success is generally unknown. Like, for example, there is no way and no how that Disney should have greenlit the final budget of nearly $500 million for Captain America Brave New World, basically the first Anthony Mackie Captain America movie, or the $200+ million final budget for First Steps. There's no way that Warner Brothers Discovery should have greenlit the $365 million budget for Superman's James Gunn. All first movies and untested franchises where there was no evidence to indicate the possibility of billion-dollar success and quite a bit of evidence actually to indicate the probability of underperformance. And every time that studios do that, put themselves in that type of position, they're basically placing themselves into a no-win situation, or at least a highly likely no-win situation. Because there's no guarantee that the audience will indeed show up to support the movie to the extent that's necessary for success. Because in this day and age, for a movie to make a profit, it usually needs to make roughly 2.5 to 3 times its overall budget, accounting for the fact that the theaters in which that movie plays will take about a half that movie's box office gross as their own collective fee for playing the movie, meaning that a movie that costs $200 million to make must make roughly $500 to $600 million to become profitable, and a movie that costs $250 million to make must make roughly $625 million to $7.5 million to be profitable. And a movie that costs $300 million to make must make roughly $750 million to $900 million to be successful, and so forth. Simply put, the certain risk just does not justify the potential reward, especially, again, in this day and age, where the costs of consumer goods like movie tickets have skyrocketed into space and have thus created an audience that's more likely to only come out in droves for movies that they passionately want to see in the first place. Then there's the fact that ever since Avengers Endgame concluded its theatrical run for Disney, and since probably Wonder Woman concluded its theatrical run for Warner Brothers, studios seem to have basically forgotten how to actually make good or compelling superhero movies. There have, of course, been stray successes like Spider-Man Far From Home and No Way Home, or Aquaman, or the Deadpool trilogy, or the Batman, or the Spider-Verse films. But by and large, both Disney and Warner Brothers, but mainly Disney, have put in their finest effort to, in making superhero films, distance themselves from the creatives, the directors and the writers who actually know how to make superhero films and who have vision regarding how to tell superhero stories so that they will connect with and draw in versus repel the audience. And I don't know, maybe that's just the result of the fact that Disney and Warner Brothers fancy themselves trying to save money by hiring writers and directors who will cost less than proven masters like Chris Nolan or Steve DeKnight or Zack Snyder or Jon Favreau. Definitely, at least on the Disney side, it's partially the result of how the company has begun to place an emphasis on hiring directors and writers whose sole or at least primary storytelling experience lies in making movies and TV shows that serve as little more than ham-fisted sermons intended to preach at the American political right while deifying the American political left, all as part of the company's seeming belief in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary that audiences want movies that focus more so on DEI and worshiping the alphabet community than telling solid stories. But either way, the end result is that no one knows how to make good superhero movies anymore. Or at least the people who do know how to make them are not being hired to do it anymore. And that naturally has led to a string of increasingly worse superhero movies over the past 6 or so years that have slowly eroded just about every last wisp of goodwill and trust from audiences that remember films like Avengers Endgame or the Dark Knight trilogy with fondness. And now those same audiences that used to go passionately to theaters to see how mind-blowingly the next Avengers or Batman film would push the boundaries of sharp entertainment go tentatively, if at all, to the theaters, just hoping that Johnny Storm won't be gay and Reed Richards won't be a total cuck in Fantastic Four. Or that there might actually be one or two action scenes amidst the political preaching of the newest Captain America movie, or that Superman might actually get a minute of spotlight instead of Lois Lane and stupid Crypto and the silly Justice Gang, whatever that is, in a movie called Superman that's supposed to be about Superman. And once those audiences do see those films and confirm that their worst fears have not come true, but that the movies are still mid at the very best, they do not repeat view the movies like they used to. They don't encourage friends or family to see them. And the movies have a massive drop off in box office sales after their first or second weeks in theater because they don't get good audience word of mouth because they are not good movies. And last but certainly not least importantly, the studios that do make mid to poor superhero movies absolutely refuse to learn the right lessons from those movies' failures or general underperformances. Like how Disney's biggest takeaway from the bombing of the Marvels was not that the movie tanked because the story was garbage and starred two mid characters from nowhere streaming series that nobody really watched, but that the MCU needed to do more nostalgia baiting by bringing back Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. for Avengers Doomsday. Or how Warner Brothers' biggest takeaway from the general underperformance of the DCEU was not that it failed because there was never a singular and good vision for what it should be, but rather that any singular vision would do, and that the infamously dour mood from Man of Steel and several other films in the DCEU needed to be overcorrected by starting the DCU with a movie featuring an insecure man-child of a Superman who gets his butt handed to him by every villain with a name, who's a secondary character to his girlfriend and even his own dog, who gets called the B word by Supergirl, and who generally acts like a puppy with opposable thumbs. Meanwhile, many, if not most, of the major movie reviewers out there, the people who act as the intermediaries between the audience and the companies making the lackluster superhero films, are more afraid of losing their insider access to premiere parties and goodie bags from companies like Disney or Warner Brothers Discovery than they are willing to put out honest reviews in which they call the messy superhero films out for what they are, which leads them to praise those lackluster superhero movies as triumphs of cinema or emphasize the one or two good things about them while refusing to discuss the millions of negative things about them. Not to mention that many, if not most, actually good film directors and writers are more so afraid nowadays of losing future work with companies like Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery than they are inspired to be honest about the state of the superhero movies that those companies are putting out, and so refuse to publicly call out those messy superhero films for what they are, which generally leads them to publicly praise the lackluster movies as well in unsolicited posts on X or Instagram, where they usually criticize audience members who did not like those lackluster films. So not only does no one know how to make good superhero movies anymore, not only are the people who do know how to make them not being hired to do so anymore, but the people whom the audience should be able to expect to fairly review those movies are more interested in shilling for the companies making them than in telling audiences the truth about them. And even many other creatives who are capable of making good superhero movies are more interested in securing future work with companies like Disney or Warner Brothers Discovery and staying in those companies' good graces than in being honest publicly about the state of superhero cinema. And the end result is basically that the studios creating bad superhero movies don't even know to do better because they create those movies in echo chambers where they're just getting high off their own product, wherein the creatives who make the movies, other creatives in general, and even the people who review the movies just act as bobbleheading yes people, egging those studios on into continuing to make those lackluster superhero films. So yeah, superhero fatigue is not killing the modern superhero film. Reckless overspending is. Hiring poor creators who are telling poor stories is. Delusional refusal to learn the right lessons from the financial floppage of dog water movies is. Shows like Invincible or The Boys and movies like Spider-Man No Way Home or The Batman or Deadpool and Wolverine have gone to prove handily that the audience is still all the way there for great superhero content or even just decent superhero content that is made specifically to respect or honor the audience instead of preaching to it or insulting it. As they say in sales, the customer is always right. And that lesson applies even more so in the entertainment business. Respect the audience, and the audience will respond in kind. Disrespect the audience, and pretty soon you won't even have an audience. Anyway, that's just my opinion, being a film reviewer and entertainment commentator who also happens to love superhero content and hate the general downturn that it's been taking over the past several years. I felt obligated to get it off my chest. Time for you to share your opinion though. Sound off in the comments below to let me know what you think about whether or not superhero fatigue is killing the modern superhero film. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Are your feelings more complex? Meanwhile, if you like this video and made it this far, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, ring that bell, and hey, follow me on social media as well. So long.